Hello, I just thought today that I would describe three things that I've done during my life that I believe has made my health better in general. I was very lucky before even any of these three things happened that my life as a child, I was not, during that time, animal products in foods was not as much as it is today. In other words, that there were many meat products that I was not consuming on a daily basis. Probably milk was the main one that was still consumed on a daily basis. And the other benefits of that time as well was that to go anywhere, I walked. We very rarely used our car to take us anywhere, and never did we ever use the car to take ourselves to school. School was a walk every day of at least a mile, and that's even from junior school, right from junior school, from 5 or 6, from 6. That was a mile's walk there and back, and on most of those occasions it was also a walk there and back at dinner times as well. Yeah, so I'd walk a mile each way, and usually that meant that I was at home just enough time to make myself, as I always did, just a few very simple sandwiches that I had along with the tea at that time. So that was always basically what dinner times were while I was at school. So my activity levels was very, what we consider now to be high, even though it was just walking to and from school. Additionally, at playtimes, I would play in the playground, and the play on most occasions would have been active. There was very little conversation for most of the part. It was much more just playing around, playing games of all sorts. Noticed that although there is playing playgrounds now, there is a heck of a lot more standing around than what used to happen when I was at school. Yeah. But anyway, so that there, I was quite active. The only thing with school was that I refused to do sports. And it was purely because there was one or two sports that I did not want to do. And just because of that, their reasoning, or for what I felt or I knew was what the situation was, is that whenever I did any particular sport, if they saw me that I was doing that, they would say, "No, you can't refuse to do that sport. You must do that. You must." So basically, if you did one sport, then they said you had to do all the other sports as well. So I eventually refused to do any sport at all, and that's fine. That was fine. And I wasn't eventually I wasn't forced to do sport, but I had to refuse to do what sports that I would have liked to have done, simply because of that sort of policy that the schools seem to have. Anyway, getting off that first now. it wasn't until after I left school, probably less than a year after I left school, that I began to start running. I did this on the basis of where I was working, because I felt the distance that I was walking to and from work every day, and that was walking to and from work, which was over two and a bit miles, and I was walking to and from work. So I thought, well, maybe I could try and run the distance. So what I started to do was I'd start by running about 100 or 2 meter, a couple of 100 meters sort of thing. Basically, that was about all I could sort of manage in one go, sort of thing. I probably could have done more, but I just wanted to sort of keep going until I felt I wanted to walk. So over a matter of maybe just 2 weeks, just under 2 weeks, I sort of gradually increased the distance of the run to work, and within that 2 weeks, I was able to run the whole way, the whole 2 miles to work. That helped a lot. I felt by far better just doing the runs to and from work. I then sort of changed down from that, and I stopped doing the runs to and from to work. I stopped doing those when I started to do running outside of the work time, the to and from work time. So then, and this was partly due to a couple of friends that wanted to start doing some running themselves, based partly on what they saw or what they witnessed when they watched the London Marathon that had just started that year before, with a few thousand runners running in it. So we all decided to meet up and do runs together, sort of thing, and from that we increased mileage, and 2 of us joined the local athletics club, and almost immediately within those first few weeks, within the couple of months, I felt by far healthier than I had done even at school, even though that was relatively healthy. So that was the first health change that I noticed substantially a difference in how I felt. The second health change came when just maybe I think it was 2 or 3 years later that I started to become vegetarian, and I believe my last meat product may have been 3 or 4 years after I started running. Now that's just the meat products. So at that time I'd gone vegetarian, which meant I was still consuming milk and eggs. At that time, I considered even fish to be meat. Very many people separated fish from meat, so they continued. Many vegetarians actually continued to eat fish for a lot of at those times. I didn't know of other vegetarians when I changed at that time. I didn't know of them. It was only it was practically a year or more later before I actually realised that there were quite a lot of vegetarians. But my reasons were quite simple in not wanting to sort of harm animals. It really, I was changed to not wanting to eat animals, not from graphic, horrific footage of what was happening to animals at all, but simply because of the actual general practice that was being shown, which I found to be horrendous, even though it was probably well, it certainly wasn't considered horrendous by the news organisations that were just showing what was happening to animals on farms. But it was horrendous to me, straight off. And that's where I stopped consuming those animals. So that was the second biggest change in my life. The third was less than, well, my friend sort of keeps sort of saying, yeah, I was and I wasn't sort of thing at certain times over these last few years. But I'm certain I can't precisely remember the last time I had egg or milk. I can't precisely remember, but I'm as certain as can possibly be that it was at least 6 years ago, at least, and may have been even as far back as 7 or 8 years ago. My friend will, I don't know whether she sort of think whether she's got that time mixed up a bit with things that she might have noticed me doing or whatever, I don't know. But anyway, at that time, around about that time anyway, I went vegan, and it was purely from my friend's actual describing to me the actual processes of the milk and egg industries. Basically, the female harm that is done to produce those products, those life products. And of course, when I did realise how bad that was, I simply coming from that side, having been eating those eggs and milk and whatever for all those years, crazy. It was crazy. It was just crazy. I could not believe. Even now, it almost feels like I cannot believe that I could not have known what absolute horrendous industry was feeding me. It still seems an impossibility that I should not have been able to work that out for myself without having to be described it to me. Now, although I am angry and ashamed that I did not see this sort of thing for myself. Although I understand that, I know it and I accept it. And for accepting it, I feel by far better. I can, because I can understand how I couldn't see the reality at the same time. But yeah, again, there were health benefits, and this change, actually, I noticed more so than my changes through starting running and becoming vegetarian. They were quite big changes, but at that time when I made those two changes, I basically was relatively very healthy, and all that, so I was comfortable. But the change for veganism, so just before I started to become vegan, I started. It wasn't. I was never ever in any serious health conditions or mad in anything bad or anything that way at all. But I noticed that I was starting to get backache, lower backache mainly. Um, Basically, that's close to about all. I mean, I was getting one or two flus that seemed to be quite bad at times. That they would seem to be getting a little bit worse, certainly than what they had been for the previous years of my life. So they were they were getting to the point whereby you started to feel like, oh, almost like you couldn't get out to go to work or anything like that. Now that had never been happening before. I was basically going along all fine and everything like that. When I changed to veganism, within the year or two, the back pain disappeared, and I still do not have back pain anymore. No, not even twinges or anything like that. I feel that that I've well, I'm certain I have had fewer flus than I did before I started to be vegan. And in actual fact, I'm pretty sure for the last 3 years that I've not had flu at all. Now, at the moment, because I've only just gone into veganism, I don't know whether that is because of veganism. But what I feel is that it is because of veganism. I've not properly looked. I don't think there's been proper research, which there should be. I'm certain there should be some research into the frequency of colds and flus under veganism, and not that should be easy to sort of work out. And yet I don't think there's ever been any specific studies on that. And it does seem something that's so simple that could be sort of investigated. It does seem that really that should be investigated with an urgency, as that on its own should be an indicator of an illness from a specific types of diet. Now then, yeah, so those are basically the three changes to my life that I felt better from. So actually now, apart from, now I actually feel at least as well as I was in my 20s. So it is strange, and it is strange that I've spent close to 50 years of my life drinking milks and having egg, Probably egg not in as big a quantity as the milks, but the milks have been lots. There's been lots of milk, and that is not good. So if I do have any sort of illnesses that may be associated with milk at any time in the future, then I believe that will be from the pre-existing amounts of milk that I did consume, although the whole body does sort of reprocess the actual things that go through the body, so hopefully most damage of what was caused by the milk will have removed itself mostly from my body by now. And I do believe that is part of the reason that I do not get colds and flus on a regular basis. I'm pretty certain of it. It's just too obvious to not actually associate that. Anyway, that's another. There's some basic things anyway. Some of you might recognise those sort of benefits and whatever. Do try to remember though whatever you did at school. If you're more recent, if you've been more recently at schools and whatever, what were the situations that decided your activity levels? Because of all health comes down to activity and diet. Everything, all health. There is health and diet are the main things that decide our health outcomes. Everything outside of that, accidents and other things, they are just accidents, and environmental things that are inflicted upon us are the only other things that are harmful to us. The biggest harm that we cause ourselves is purely in what we put through our bodies, what we interact with. We can do better for our bodies. We can do better for our bodies, for animals, and our environment. Let us do so.